Well, hey everybody, what's going on? This is Ricky, and since we are on the cusp of turkey season, we figured it would only make sense to talk about turkey hunting with a bow. And what more appropriate conversation could we have than that with one of the most successful turkey hunters that we know? Matt Dykes is a Minnesota native and an absolute turkey slayer. With several Grand Slams and a World Slam, Matt is no slouch when it comes to turkey hunting, especially with a bow. Matt certainly makes it look easy, but as a humble man, he admits his fair share of failures that have led to a lot of success. Stick around, you're not going to want to miss this one. Welcome to the Range Podcast. I'm Ricky Bruley, and with me is Jake Hollywood Iverson. Join us at the archery range, where we'll tell stories from the hunt, discuss technical bow shooting tactics and gear, and pick the brains of some of the most successful people to ever shoot a bow. Whether you're about to shoot that X for the win, or send an arrow at a trophy buck, this podcast is for you. The Range Podcast is brought to you by Vapor Trail Archery, makers of the best bowstrings money can buy, originators of limb-driven arrow rest technology, and innovators of Stokerized stabilizer systems. Welcome to The Range, everybody. I'm your host, Ricky Bruley, and as always, I'm here with my trusty sidekick, Hollywood.
That's me. Trusty though, huh?
Trusty.
Wow.
How's it going?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. You got the Easton order written?
Yeah, Easton's
It's
finally
good.
done.
We're gonna
Trent can be off my back.
place a huge order for Easton arrows to get us through the next 6.5 years.
Well, maybe 6 months.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. You can also find the video version of this episode on our Vapor Trail YouTube channel. So make sure you head on over, subscribe, give us a like, and hit that bell so you can be up to date on all things archery. Also, don't forget to follow us at the Range Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, as well as Vapor Trail Archery and Stokerized Stabilizers. Matt, thank you for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks
Welcome
for
to
having
the
me
show.
to come on, guys.
Yeah, appreciate
It's
it.
great to be
Our
here.
honor.
Right? So yeah, man, tell us a bit about yourself and your archery origin story.
Archery origin story. Well, I guess hunting origin story in general. I've been hunting, with my dad since I was probably a 2 or 3 year old kid. And growing up, it wasn't turkeys, it wasn't deer, it was a lot of upland, right, pheasant and grouse, and it was just obviously walking with. And really didn't get into archery until I was probably in my late teens. So late teens, I actually got my first bow, believe it or not, out of a garbage can.
What?
Yep, first bow out of a garbage can.
That's awesome.
And looked at it, and there wasn't much wrong with it. I worked at an outdoor store at the time, and we're moving locations, and I'm pretty sure the archery manager at the time didn't want to transfer inventory to the new store, so he just tossed a bunch of old bows.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't anything fancy or anything. So just one of my buddies, Richie, was big into archery, and he kind of helped me get started and started shooting the bow. And from there it progressed to, I wanted to get a little bit nicer equipment and things of that nature. And got to a point where I decided this is really cool. I was in my late teens, early 20s, and said, I want to get good at this. And that meant going to the range every single day and just shooting over and over, hundreds of shots in a day. And I guess in some essence that kind of, got me to where I am now, to where it's you kind of build your base and you learn along the way. And I think the thing that has been most effective for me is just being coachable or being open to listen to, when people give you advice. So if you look at somebody who's experienced in anything in life, right, or that has had a lot of success, they probably have a lot of tips. So I think it's human nature a lot of times to think we know what we're doing all the time and know what we're talking about, instead of taking the advice and saying, okay, I can work on this or that. And so when I was starting out, I made a point of just to really listen, whether somebody's telling me about, hey, your form, you shoot with an open hand, or you do this for your anchor point, or whatever it might be. Just really focused on ways that I could get better, and made sure I wasn't letting my ego get in the way. And I guess that's kind of really where I guess I started. I don't know if that's the best answer, but it's that's kind of how I started, and as far as archery goes. But once I hit really my early 20s, that's really all I did is bow hunt for the most part. So.
That's so sweet. I have to ask, did that first bow, did it come complete with a sight and rest and everything, or?
No, it didn't come with a
dang.
sight and a rest, so I had the old trophy taker with the whale tail
Yeah.
on there, I remember that one, then just your basic, 3-pin True Glow, and shot a deer my first time in the stand. It was one of those, I didn't know what I was doing. My buddy took me out and got up in the stand, shot a doe on my first ever archery hunt, so that was cool. I was pretty hooked then, and that's when I didn't even know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience, and then kind of a crazy story. The next thing I shot after that was a 400-pound black bear.
Holy
Yeah,
Jesus.
man. Wow.
Good start. My goodness.
So it was, you want to talk about, it's a great story I had from back in the day. I'd have to tell you guys sometime with my dad is, with limited archery experience, and all of a sudden you arrow a giant black bear, and then it gets dark out, and then you got to go track it, and then you're like, I think I know what I'm doing, and it led to a pretty crazy story. But it was I made a good shot and everything, so there wasn't anything scary about it. But it was a pretty funny story.
So how was your deep passion for turkey hunting? How was that ignited? I guess was that through archery, or was that kind of your dad bringing you up through the upland hunting and that sort of thing, or?
I would say it was really just something. I didn't turkey hunt for the first time until I was about 13 years old.
Gotcha.
And my dad had pretty much no experience at it. So we were both learning together. I mean, it was basically you go out with, this is before my archery days, obviously, and you go out with a shotgun and you got a box call, and you'd watch some hunting videos before, and you said, oh, I think this is how I do this, right? And we had gone out and struggled, honestly. I mean, this was back in the days when I first started hunting Minnesota, and you could only hunt turkeys in the southeast portion of the state because that's where they had reintroduced them. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was a lottery. It was about a 50% chance you're going to get a tag. So that's where we had started hunting. There was limited birds, and I, obviously screwed up a bunch. Things I look back now and I'm just like, what were you thinking? And this is when I was, it should have been easy. I was using a gun.
I was gonna say you got a shotgun.
And anyways, yeah, it was 5 years before I ever shot one with a shotgun. It was just Jake, but it was a big deal at the time, and
For sure.
but I just kind of decided, I got a bow in my hands, and then I think, a lot of it, I look back at too, I said, where did this start? I just had that fire inside me to hunt, ever since I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I remember, it'd be like 5 or 6 years old, and my dad would go on hunting trips, and my mom would tell me to go to bed at 10, 11 o'clock, or earlier than that, obviously, probably 9 o'clock at night. But I knew my dad was coming home, so I'd purposely lay in bed awake, waiting for the garage door to open, because this is before the days of cell phones, and I'd go running downstairs pretending like I had to get a drink of water or something, just because I was anxious to see, did he get any pheasants, did he get any grouse? That was exciting to me, right?
Yeah.
And that never really stopped. That was just something with hunting I was always excited about. So kind of looping back to your question, where did the turkey hunting thing come from? I think just the struggle in the continuing to build skills and the perseverance. I just thought there was a cool aspect to the overall game of turkey hunting, that the allure to it. And then once I got a bow in my hands, I was like, I really want to get good at this. I really want to pursue being elite at this if I can be. I'm not sure if my potential is to be elite, but I really want to pursue it and work on my skills. And, I think back to some other things is, the old double bowl videos with Keith and Brooks and John.
Yeah.
I used to just watch those all the time, and I sit there and say, man, I want to do that someday. I was like, because it's just so cool, right? It was just, I don't know what it was about it, but just the whole essence of bow hunting turkeys, and it was the difficulty to it, and just the whole interaction thing with the birds and how to do it. And that's kind of really kind of what got me started. And don't get me wrong, I struggled a ton to start with. It wasn't like it was ever easy,
Right.
So, but it was I run into those guys every so often, obviously John, and then run into Brooks, and talk turkey hunting. And then Brooks is like, man, you shoot a lot of turkeys. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I remember watching all your videos and stuff, so it's kind of really cool. So.
We'll be right back.
Isn't that wild? Like the first time I met him too, I was just like, I was at Game Fair, I think.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just really surreal. You know, it was just one of those moments where I was just like, and we were just talking about bows and archery and stuff like that. He was a really rad dude. And
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool how that all kind of comes around. And I wanted to ask you too, you mentioned earlier about, there was a outdoor store that you worked at. And so then it kind of jostled my memory a little bit. And I think it reminded me of when I think there was a year that I shot leagues at Gander Mountain in Blaine. And I think I shot with you, and Glenn and Scott were there. I shot with Ben, and I remember Matt Fry
Yep.
was working back there at that time.
He was the archery manager back there.
Yeah, he was running. But were you working there too?
Yeah,
I don't
because
remember.
it used to be. I think it used to be. It was a different store, and then transferred to the Blaine store. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, because I do remember. I think that's the first time I met you, because I had just moved here. Hadn't lived here that long. It was probably 2006 or 2007, something like that. I don't know if it was the first year I was here or the second year, but yeah, I just remember shooting with you at that Gander Mountain shoot, and I completely forgot that that's where I had first met you.
Yeah.
How I first. So anyway, I was working for Sportsman's Warehouse at the time, and
Yeah.
you guys were working at Gander Mountain, and then
Yep.
eventually Matt Fry would come to work for Vapor Trail.
Good
He
Lord.
built strings for us for a
What
while.
a small world.
So did
Yeah.
his brother.
Head to head.
Yep.
David built for us for a while too.
Yep.
So anyway,
That's,
I just wanted to.
I was just gonna say that I'm a late bloomer into turkey hunting. I've told you before. It's like I think that's where my drive comes from too. Is if that's kind of what you were saying, is just like my first year of full on failure.
Yeah.
And of course the warmer sunrises than you get with deer hunting is nice as well, but
Yep.
the struggle. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is way harder than it looks. Like,
Yeah.
kind of what you're saying. It's like you see it on TV and you're like, these things are stupid. They come right to a call. Like, it's
Yeah.
not hard. And ever since then, it's like right now I'm just getting goosebumps, like thinking about it. I'm just like, I can't wait. Like,
Yeah.
so stupid. A stupid bird, like just the challenge of it, just since that first year of failure. Then the last 2 years, sure, I've been successful, but just learning more and more about it every year.
Yeah.
It just makes me want to go back again. Like, okay, what did I screw up last year? How am I going to fix it this year? Just getting better constantly at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say the biggest key is to, I've gone through a lot of things where I've just had to persevere. You take punches in the gut, and you're like, man, maybe I should do. In the beginning, I was like, man, maybe I should just be a shotgun hunter. That's where you go to, and because it's you have moments where you got birds that they came within 5-10 yards of you, and you screwed something up, where they saw you move or whatever, and then they're gone and out of your life forever. So it's a lot of things. I've learned a lot of life lessons for sure from it. I think the most valuable thing you can teach anybody, whether it's hunting or not, is the power of perseverance, and just it's there's a saying, they say it's hard to stop a guy that doesn't give up.
Right.
So it's a power of perseverance, and then just I'd say, I know I'm going to screw up at some point this upcoming season. It's going to happen. That's just reality. We're human, right?
Right.
So the advice I give anybody is, when you screw up, just be honest with yourself about it and say, what could I have done differently? Is there something to be learned from this? And sometimes it's a simple lesson. Sometimes it's hard to find a lesson out of it. But if you use that, I think back to the way I do my setups and everything now. Everything that I think of, whether I'm hunting out of a blind or hunting just out of the brush or just whatever I'm doing, it's things that I've screwed up before. When I'm getting everything ready, say, I'm doing this because I don't want this to happen like it did this time.
Right.
And that's really what you do.
Right.
And that can go to any type of hunting or lots of things in life, really. So Ricky, you do a lot of deer hunting. You could probably say, okay, well, there's this time this deer winded me because I walked in this way, and they winded me out of the bedding area or something of that nature, and then you learn something in that essence, and you move on and you get better.
Yeah. I'm only on year 4 of this, and 2 birds down. I mean, this upcoming year will be my 4th year, but I know you guys have shot way more than I have, I'm sure.
Don't look at me.
I mean, you've been doing this a while. Same with Matt. I mean,
It's definitely time spent, without a doubt. I've done a lot of stalking on turkeys to with very little success.
Yeah.
And I've tried decoys. I've tried, you know what I mean, all kinds of different things. And I've hunted South Dakota for a couple of years with my buddy, and I've had a lot of opportunities where I can put stocks on them, and I've failed time and time again. And every single time I'm like, how does Matt do it? Every time. I'm not even kidding you. So it's just like, and again, I don't do it that much, you know what I mean? So, and I don't have my heart and soul isn't into it like it is like other types of hunting. So I also acknowledge that as well. I'm just a better ambush hunter and a blind if anything, but even like last year I had an opportunity and I, the bird, I think I shot at it at like maybe 5 feet because it was coming at me so fast that by the time I let my arrow go, it went over his back.
Oh yeah.
And then he spun around and took off.
There.
And just such a cool experience. Like I didn't get the bird, and we talked about it on the podcast, and I was just like, but it was so jacked up, and it was such a cool story to tell. Yeah. And then it was, what was it, a weekend later then I think I whacked my bird. But yeah, and a lot of times I'm kind of like, this year I'm a little bit more hyped up, and I think it's because, last year I got a bird with my bow, and then the one I got before that was with a shotgun. Because I did the thing that you said. I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm getting a shotgun, and so I did it with the shotgun. But then last year, my buddy whose land I was hunting on, he was like, well, you can use a shotgun, but I'm not going to let you. He's like, you need to go out there with a bow. And so I'm glad that he did, and so it just really gets you. There's so much more pride in it. I don't know if pride is the right word, but there's just like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to kill a turkey with a bow. It's hard.
It's a new challenge.
It's tough. And I would, I won't belittle anybody that shotgun hunts. Everybody has things in life that they enjoy. I would never ever want to take that from them. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'll agree, your best hunters out there, as far as, any kind of hunting goes, whether it's turkey and deer hunting, that it's your bow hunters, right? Mm-hmm. Because it takes that much more skill and skills that other people don't necessarily have to develop with other weapons. But I mean, it's just all about what you enjoy. I'll give you an example of like one thing I really enjoy is I love trout fishing, right? Yeah. But I'm not your fly fisherman. I go out there with an ultralight and half a night crawler and catch trout, and that's just what I enjoy, but I know the fly fishermen, those guys are way better at that I am. Or grouse hunting. I grew up grouse hunting. I love grouse hunting. I'd say 90% of the grouse I shoot are on the ground. I know the guys that go out there with their pointing dogs and shoot them flying are way better than I am, but it's just what I enjoy, So somebody enjoys being a gun hunter, there's nothing wrong with that. Life's too short to not do what you enjoy, and just happens to be, it's the bow hunting that we enjoy, and that's what we do, and so that's why we do it.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I like that. So up to date, how many turkeys do you think you've taken with a bow?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's in the hundreds. I mean,
too many to count.
I don't want to sound arrogant or anything like that. It's in the hundreds. But I would say I usually shoot between 20 and 30 a year with a bow. Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean,
my whopping one. I'm like, woo!
Never mind. Anytime I get one, I'm pretty pumped too. Yeah, And that's why I've just continued to pursue it, because anyone that I get, I'm pumped about it. Yeah. So it's what I love to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you're driving your passion. I mean, keep going for it. I mean, and you do out of state trips too. And so that obviously can add to the total as well. So I mean,
it has to.
It has to. I'm not doing that in one state. I'm doing that. I've turkey hunted successfully in 9 different months out of the year. You know, several states. You know, done it in the United States as well as Mexico.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously, if you're getting between 20 and 30 a year, you have to be doing several states or countries and pursuing it pretty avidly. So.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in Minnesota most years. Maybe this year I'll go to Wisconsin. So, big deal. But
yeah,
what you said Mexico. Now I don't know if that would be your favorite story, but what would be? It just sounds interesting. But what would be maybe your top story or favorite memory with archery kill? I guess for a bird.
I mean, I got a lot of them. There's a lot of them that are near and dear to my heart. You know, there's one that I think of with my dad. I'll give. There's 2 that come to mind. I'll give you one quick. It was really cool because it was with my dad, and we were hunting down in Kansas. We're down in, and I don't know if you guys have been down there, but it gets real windy. And this is over a decade ago probably, but it's about 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And it was so windy that the tonneau cover blew off my truck.
Whoa.
You know, bent the frame, wrecked it, everything.
My God.
And I had scouted these birds for a few days, just watching them, saving it, because my dad drove down separately from when I did, and I was kind of saving it to when we could hunt together, and so he gets down there, and it's so windy that I had to tie the ground blind to a tree so it didn't blow away. And we're there, and it's so windy you can't hear anything. And I'm like, are these birds going to come? Or, you know, are they going to come in? Are we going to see anything? It's like, are we just wasting our time?
Right.
And just kept calling, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, I got a tom comes charging in. I shoot that one, and then within 10 minutes, I called these other ones. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to call turkeys across a creek. It's not easy.
No.
I was able to call some birds across the creek, and then he shot a double.
Oh, wow.
So Dad and I tripled. It was just a really cool hunt because of the conditions, everything. I have a lot of family. It's from down in the Kansas area, so able to kind of share that with some of them, and that was just a really cool memory. Another memory I have is it's really cool because it's something I screwed up, and I was able to redeem myself. So it was this a few years ago. I was hunting late season, like December, out of state.
Wow.
And it was 20 below zero. It's 20 below zero. I'm out there. I got a heater in my blind.
Wow.
And I've been watching these birds. And a lot of times, you know, when you're hunting different seasons, sometimes you're just watching what's going on before you're making a plan and executing on that plan. So there was these birds that were hitting this, there's a little bit of standing corn left. And they were hitting it midday, like noon, 1 o'clock. It wasn't like they weren't roosting in the area or anything like that. So, but I got out there early, and I was sat there for about 7 hours, and it was 20 below zero. And I had a heater in the blind, but I did set myself on fire because it was, you know. And next thing I know, and just for reference, a lot of times throughout the year, I'll actually use a strutter decoy.
Okay.
Even in fall and winter, and a lot of guys don't know this, but you know, it'll be like February or March, or weather get warm, and guys like, oh, they're strutting already. Well, turkeys will strut, and they'll get in fights year round. It's not just a spring thing, and unless you hunt year round, you don't necessarily realize that. So a lot of times I'll use a strutter decoy if I'm hunting toms in particular. Next thing I know, I got these toms. There's a group of 7 toms came charging my decoy. And I positioned myself slightly off, and the snow crunched under my knee. When I was drawn back to shoot, they heard me, and I tried to shoot quick, just got feathers off one, and they flew away and out of my life forever. So as you can imagine, I was pretty pissed off about it, but I just like, you know what, I just laughed. I was like, man, I gave it my all. I was sitting here in this 20 below zero weather, you know, and that happens, right? And I've had it happen where I sat in that cold of weather for an entire day late in the season, you know, because you only got sometimes 8 hours of daylight or something like that, and just to have not show up, you know. So it's not like I go out every time and just you know, there's times where I fail a lot too, but the following year I went out same place almost a year to the day, and it was the same story. It was a group of 7 toms doing a very similar thing in a very similar spot, and at this point in time, I had scouted them. They were roosting in the area, and it was in the blind for 30 minutes, and I shot a triple.
What? That is redemption if I've ever heard it. My
Yeah,
gosh.
yep. So that was, I shot, 3 of them. I fired 3 arrows in a matter of probably about, if I had to guess, within about 20, 25 seconds.
wow.
Just, one after the other. And at that point, things are going well. I don't know. It's a feeling. It's hard to describe. Is you're not really thinking. You're just reacting. That's how when you're in the zone, right?
Yeah.
When Ricky, when you made a perfect shot on a deer, or whatever you're hunting, you probably you reacted and you knew it was good. You didn't think about, okay, I got to aim here, this, that, there. It was just boom, and it was a good shot. And that's what happened on all 3 of them. And I was like, I just said to myself, I was like, did that just happen?
Yeah.
Did
Wow.
that really just happen? So
Were they
cool.
peeling back and beating up on the one that went down, or was it just rapid fire?
It was. I mean, on the first one, and that does happen sometimes. On the first one, it was one went down, second one went up to be like, I don't know if it was going to beat it up or whatever. I didn't give it time to think about it.
Okay.
Shot the second one, and the other one started bailing, and I got one going away.
Holy cow!
So it was.
You were in the zone then.
Yeah,
You're
man.
locked.
Yep. So
Good.
it was. I just sat back and said, thank you God for that one for sure.
Yeah.
No
It was,
kidding.
It was, so it was definitely redemption, and it really got me to thinking. I was like, what are the coincidences? It's group is likely. What are the chances that it wasn't the same group of birds?
Right.
7 toms in a particular area doing similar things. It's likely the same group of birds.
Right.
Yeah.
That's insane. I mean, you're saying 20 below in December hunting turkeys, and I'm over here like, yeah, I think I was in, Western state chasing muleys. I'm not even thinking about birds that time of year.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you got a whole new bug biting onto you. Like that's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
insane.
absolutely. And I've done the deer hunting thing too. There's years where I
Right.
hunted 4 different states for whitetails and things, and I enjoy that as well. But it's when you get to a certain point in your career, you're like, man, what do I truly enjoy? What do I truly
Right.
want to pursue? And that's what I'd encourage anybody to do.
Yeah.
At
Right.
all costs.
Right.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. That's really
Sweet.
cool. So tell us a little bit about that World Slam.
Yeah, so for anybody that isn't familiar with what the World Slam is, so there's 6 different subspecies of turkeys, throughout North America or throughout the world. So you got your easterns. That's really what we have here in Minnesota, and then pretty much anywhere east of here. And then in Florida, you have your Osceolas, which is basically just kind of like a small eastern is really what they look like. They kind of have some darker wings than the easterns do, and they're a little bit smaller. And then you got your Rio Grandes, which is in a lot of south central U.S., like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and then in some of the western states as well. And then you get your Merriams. You get some of those like out in Nebraska and some other your western states, Colorado's, Washington, Montana, out in there. So that's like the main 4 within the continental U.S. or the continental U.S. I should say. And then you have the Gould's turkey, which looks just like a big Merriam's is what it looks like. And they do have a few, I believe, in Arizona, and then quite a bit in like the northern regions of Mexico, like in the Sierra Madre Mountains. And then you have the ocellated turkeys, which is the ones that look kind of like a small peacock almost,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
very colorful, and those are in areas of like the Yucatan and Campeche, and then Belize, I believe, as well. So I have 2 World Slams with bow. I just completed that last year. So it was an adventure for sure. So as if you would have asked me 5 or 6 years ago, are you ever going to go after a Grand Slam? And because I had shot several, lots of Easterns, Merriams, Rios throughout my years, and it's like I don't know if it really interests me or not. But it was 2020, and I decided, all right, well, let's go after the Osseo. Let's go to Florida, and it was kind of an interesting story because it was I went on my hunt probably a week after Trump declared a national emergency.
Oh, nice.
During
Good
COVID.
timing.
And I just remember, my dad drove me to the airport, and nobody knew what to think, so I was kind of scared, and I said, looked at my dad, and and he's somebody I've gone through to a lot throughout my life just for advice or get thoughts, and I think a lot of us as hunters, talk to our dads a lot, and just kind of bounce ideas off of them, right? And I'm like, Dad, if you were me, would you still be going on this trip? He's like, absolutely not. But I'm not you, so you go. So you go do this. So
That's good.
I got on a plane that it should have been 300 people. There's 30 of us on the plane, and flight attendant says to me, she says, "Oh, you must be flying home." I'm like, "No, I'm going turkey hunting." And so went down there, and got my first Osceola Grand Slam, and I ended up getting a single season Grand Slam that year.
Wow.
And so it was, a memorable experience, memorable year, so to speak, with everything going on. And I don't know if technically I haven't got a single season, quote unquote, Grand Slam, but I've gotten, or World Slam, I should say. I've done the Grand Slam a couple times, single season, but World Slam I've done within one calendar year. So
Right.
I started, 1 year in late March and finished the following year in late February. So I don't know if that counts. It doesn't really matter to me if it does count or not. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask about that for our listeners, and I was kind of drawing a blank on it too. I'm like, is there a specific time frame for it to technically call it that? But
yeah,
I don't know if it
and to
matters.
tell you the truth, I've never even registered any of my birds
Yeah.
or anything like
slams.
that. I mean, I think it's just more of a bragging rights, saying, "Oh, I've done a single season World Slam or
Yeah.
single season Grand Slam," or but it's whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that's cool.
That's
awesome, man.
sweet. Those ocellated birds. I remember. I think I was talking to you right before you left last year. I was like, that is like before I even got into turkey hunting. I'm like, I want that. And
Yeah.
you're like, it's only in Yucatan. I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
Maybe.
yeah, no,
Maybe,
it was a very cool experience. I mean, that portion of Mexico is you fly into Merida, which is one of the safest cities, probably the safest city in Mexico, and then you take you into basically a conversion van. You go out 4 hours into the jungle, and you go
Wow.
hunt. You don't really have cell phone or internet or anything like that. Place to stay was a nice place, but it's a very different experience. Guys down there, I never forget, they had trail camera pictures of jaguars and stuff. and-
what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my
So
lord.
it was definitely a memorable experience. So
This is a side note. Continuing on to that, are you hunting them roughly the same way? Like you're getting up early, going out into the blind, just like you would anything else, and calling them in, or is it just like a pattern them and just go out midday, or?
you're referring to the oscillated turkeys?
Yeah, the oscillated. Yeah.
Those you're mainly on feeding patterns. At least the time
Okay.
that I was there. So it's almost like a fall turkey hunt, to where you're kind of
Gotcha.
patterning them. So if you go in late February, early March, they aren't really going to be strutting or doing their gobble very much. You're just kind of getting them on feeding patterns, figuring out where they're going to be and trying to set up on them. Brushing the blind in real good and doing it that way. So it's different, but there are similarities to tactics and everything like that. And they're actually not very big. Most people don't know. I mean, bird I shot was 10.5 pounds, and that's a good sized tom.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're not very big.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different experience, but there are similarities. If you can bow hunt a turkey up here, you can bow hunt a turkey down there. It's not, you can figure it out.
That's
right?
pretty sweet. That's
Yeah.
so sweet. And the weather, I'm sure, is a little warmer too, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was 95, a high about 95 every single day I was down there. Yeah, and this is in February, so it gets hot down there, and
My God.
you're in the blind, and you're like, man, this is roasting. It's like it reminded me when I was antelope hunting
It's
almost.
the opposite of your December hunt. You're just
Yeah.
like now pouring sweat. It's
Yeah,
like, oh my
absolutely,
gosh.
absolutely.
insane.
So,
It's so cool to think about all the different environments that you've had the opportunity to hunt turkeys in. So what's your longest shot with a bow?
longest shot with a bow was 75 yards.
75.
Wow.
And you practice quite a bit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep, at longer ranges. Obviously just building that muscle memory and seeing how your arrows perform at longer distances. I use for my turkey setup, I use a single pin sight, right? And most of those you're hoping are 20 yards and under,
Right, yeah.
for sure, right? You want them close. You don't want them to be far.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I'm out there, aim high and let her fly type
Right,
thing every time.
yeah.
It's situational. If it's the first day, I'm not going to shoot at turkeys, out there 50 and 60 and 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
It's situational to where, okay, is the animal calm? What are the wind conditions? Do I think I can make this shot? It comes down to a lot of different things. And so it was just kind of a scenario where I was like, okay, this is probably going to be the only chance I get. It was early season. Birds weren't coming to calls, weren't even responding to calling
Right.
decoys, anything like that. And it's like, it's now or never. And, I said, all right. And I thought I can make this shot. I can miss this shot too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the key to that is, knowing how your equipment performs, being familiar with it, shooting at longer distances and shooting broadheads, or at the very least practice broadheads at longer distances and seeing what they do. So, I know how my equipment performs and what I need to do to be successful for the most part, but you have to make smart decisions too, because the reality is if you go just, you go back to getting too aggressive, Ricky, I think back to when you're talking about stalking and things like this. And I've been successful stalking, but I would say way more times than not I've been unsuccessful stalking and blown my hunt because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in terms of, how many days do I have to hunt? And I've gotten aggressive before and made longer shots or missed longer shots. But the reality is, once those birds know they're being hunted, they're probably going to leave the property a lot of the time, and they're not just going to come back and roost the same spot. And so you have to think in terms of, no, I just need to let them do their thing for today and then execute a game plan for tomorrow. So a lot of the times when I'm, especially, fall hunting or things like that, it's a tactic I've, kind of learned from one of my closest friends. Chris Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
Texas. Yeah. So he's one of my close friends, and years ago I'd always pick his brain about just bow hunting in general. He doesn't turkey hunt a lot, but he was kind of explaining to me. I whitetail hunted with him a few times, and he would to this day, I think he still does it, will scout twice as hard as, if not more, than he hunts. Even if he's doing an out-of-state hunt, just watch what animals like to do. So, that's kind of something I picked up, a long time ago, and said, I'm going to kind of implement some of these tactics sometimes, especially when birds aren't necessarily coming into calls or decoys, things of that nature. Just kind of watch where they want to be. It's not like you're just going to go out there and call every single bird in, no matter if you're a world champion stage caller or this, that, the other. A lot of that stuff can be just for show, to where you got to kind of know what those animals want to do and then execute a game plan. So a lot of times when I'm go out of state, I'll make myself. It's so hard because Hollywood, you and I were talking about this the other day. You get there and like, man, I just want to hunt, right?
Yeah.
But if things don't work in your favor, if you just go set up, a couple things can happen. Number one, you can totally scare every animal away that you didn't know was there, especially if you're just going in the dark. Number two, you can have just a hunt that doesn't end up well. Maybe the animals weren't there because you didn't scout, and you missed an opportunity to kind of watch from a distance to where finding animals and actually figuring out what they were doing. And a lot of times, we don't have unlimited vacation time, so you want to take the time to actually watch what's going on and give yourself the best chance to be successful.
Right.
If that makes sense, So some of my best hunts I've had, it's like, 'cause I took the first day or at least half day and said, okay, what are the animals doing here? Are they roosted here? Where do they like to go? Where do they like to feed? Where's my best chance at executing a game plan to make it happen and have a successful hunt.
Right. I think that's a big part for me. You touched on perseverance. It's like, I feel patience is the other P that's up there. you know, I've learned a lot of patience with turkey hunting. I think more than deer hunting. It's like, oh my gosh, like you can see it out there and you just want, I've hunted with, Sam, but I've hunted with this guy that used to work here, and, I can see him and he's like, stop calling. And I'm just sitting there in my head, like, call. Like, I want to get it to go quick. And it's like, patience is just so huge. And having that when you're going into a new spot is so hard. Like you and I were saying the other day, it's like you get there and you're just like, boots are on the ground, let's go. And it's like, you got to tell yourself, no, let's just hang back, scout it out, check it out before you just ruin the whole week you took off.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
really tough.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like what you said about, spending, that first day or, couple days or however many, whatever you think you need to scout it out and make sure that you can capitalize properly when it comes time. What is, like, when you're going into a new place, where do you start? Yeah, do you do a lot of e-scouting?
Cyber scouting? Or
Yeah,
whatever,
e-scouting or whatever,
Like,
like just looking at the lay of the land before you get there, and then you use that to kind of go, okay, well, here's a high point that I can get on so I can see down into this area. Or do you have kind of like a strategy that you use regularly?
yeah, I mean, I kind of know what it looks like kind of in my mind. And I've gone as far as to, when I started to really, over, long time ago in my early 20s when things really started to click for me, what I was doing is I'd go on Google Earth or Google Maps, whatever you want to call it, and I'd look at different spots that I had to hunt. But I'd also look at, prospective, pieces of property that I'd like to get on, ask permission on, or that were public or whatever it might be. And I'd look at the place that I have to hunt where they say, okay, there's a lot of birds here. What does this look like? Is there a water source here? Are there big chunks of timber? Is there crops in the area? And, I can't give you an exact picture of what that looks like,
Right.
With actually physically showing you. But you start to learn, like, okay, I'd look, 10 miles down the road on the map, and okay, like, there's probably birds over here, right? And that's kind of what I do. I would actually drive out of state to go knock on doors and ask permission. Whether it was, off season, before the season, whatever it might be, just to get in different pieces of property. And so my mindset was always, you kind of learn what to look for. So I did that early on, especially. And then, even going back to properties that I've already hunted, there's very few properties where I know exactly what the birds are going to do year to year. And I'll give you a kind of a funny example of I hunted Kansas a lot growing up, or early on, I should say. And there's a property I had to hunt that my grandpa had introduced me to a landowner, because my grandpa was a cattle farmer back in the day, and he introduced me to a landowner that had some turkeys, and the guy let me hunt, and ended up getting on there. And this is back in the day when I didn't even know how to use a mouth call, a slate call. All I could use is the only thing I knew how to use is a box call. So I was really green. I really didn't know what I was doing. And I ended up, getting lucky, shot a couple birds over a course of a few days. And I was like, man, I think I got this thing figured out. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go hunt down there in the fall too. Well, I drove down there, hunted the fall, and I hunted for 5 days and did not see a single turkey.
Wow.
Yep. So that goes to show you that it's even on properties where birds might be one spot this time of year or year to year. Things change. Birds move. It's 90% of the time it's in your best advantage not to be aggressive right away. Just watch what's going on. Watch what birds like to do. And that changes throughout the course of the spring too. And you might have different tactics that you have in different states or different subspecies of birds. But it's always in your best advantage to let them do what they want to do, and you just make a game plan accordingly if you can do that, right? Sometimes you don't always have that luxury, but sometimes it's in your best advantage to, let the animals, go where they want to go, and you just be where you got to be.
Sure. Another question that I wanted to ask was my lack of knowledge that I have, right? So like, I feel like I've kind of got the spring season down okay, and then the fall season, because I've hunted fall season, not a ton, but the only piece of advice that I've ever been given with fall hunting turkeys is to rush in and bust them off the roost and then wait for them to come back. And I'm like, and I've tried that, but didn't work. And again, I haven't done it a lot. I haven't hunted that way a lot. Like, usually I'll just, again, kind of do something similar to what you're doing, because I don't know, I haven't had the same amount of success calling them but then I also can't really claim that I'm a really, really good at that either. So,
Yeah.
but I have had some success with them, coming into, just in an ambush type of a situation. I just kind of figured out a pattern of where they were moving through and then set up in between there, midday, and then sat for the evening and waited for them to come past while they were working their way to the roost. But
yeah, so typically that tactic that people are referring to, if it works, it's usually working on real young birds like poults, because you bust them up, or people even do it. It's kind of cool to watch if some people do it with dogs in some states where it's legal, where they send the dog out there to bust them up, and they go set up and do a lot of kiki, different calls, like try to get them to come back in.
Yeah,
that's not going to work with your smart old Tom or anything like that.
Sure.
They're not going to come back. And I've even had it happen where, the moment a Tom figures out, I've hunted in the fall where it's actually happened last year. I was hunting a group of probably about 50 birds or so, and there's a group of 5 or 6 Toms, and I didn't get too aggressive, but for whatever reason, the birds came to roost in the evening. They went about 40 yards from me. I mean, shotgun would have been an easy shot all day, but I didn't have a shot through the brush, so I didn't take it. So I just kind of let them go to roost, whatever. And the following day, the only thing that came back was the hens. And the Toms are roosted in the same spot. And I guess kind of what I've learned in hunting several months out of the year and hunting for so long is that male animals in general are very unpredictable. And you look at, and people will say, well, these turkeys roost in this same spot every year in the spring. Well, that's because they're following the hens. I've had it happen so many times where I thought I had a group of Toms pegged. It's like, okay, they roosted in these trees, they fed in these fields, this, and I'm like, all right, I set up. And like I said, I sat for an entire day to just have them not even show. And they didn't roost in the same spot. But I think, once breeding season in spring comes along, and they're following hens, those hens are pretty predictable as long as you don't spook them, right? They're a lot of times, the hens and the young ones, they're roosting in the same spot, feeding in the same fields, doing the same thing. Well, once the Toms start following them, they pretty much are doing the same thing because of that. But, if you have experience, hunting a mature buck or mature bear or things of that nature, it's hard to put a pattern on a lot of them, either because they just have a large range or because they, they're not showing up during daylight all the time, or they're coming out of a different bedding area or whatever it may be. And I just think there's something, I can't always put my finger on it. So I'd be lying if I told you I always know where these birds are going to roost or what these birds are going to do, because I don't. I've failed so many times that I've learned that it's hard to predict. So when you are successful and you do get it right, it's something to truly be thankful for, because it can go not in your favor more than it can.
Right. It's tough. I mean, I don't know. I'm still new to this thing. I'm just expecting to hopefully cut them off and then beat the shotgun guys to it, because I'm still running public land. So
you'll run into different patterns in the spring too, to where early on you'll have your where you'll have a larger group, to where if you're going to call birds off, those dominant Toms are going to be with those hens. And if you're calling Toms away, it's usually the more submissive or satellite Toms you want to call. It's almost like elk hunting, so to speak, to where you're calling the satellite bull off, right? Or you're calling the jakes in. But then once you get into, and for everybody that's listening, when I'm talking time frames, I'm referring to the Midwest, like Minnesota and Wisconsin and states up in here, because I know the seasons vary by state, and the times these things happen vary by state. So a lot of times when you get into like late April, early May, a lot of those hens are starting to nest and things, and those more dominant Toms are easier to call. They're more aggressive. They're not henned up as much. And then I've just kind of noticed a lot of times when I get into that late May, it's a lot harder. You all of a sudden you almost get more back into a feeding pattern, to where you're kind of more watching what they do, and you have to pretty much be right in front of them, because it doesn't matter. And this doesn't apply to all scenarios and situations, but there's a lot of times you get into like late spring. It doesn't matter how good of a caller you are, really. It's being at the right place, right time, knowing where to be. Because a lot of times they won't even pick their head up at a call, no matter how good you are. So
right.
it varies, just kind of recognizing where you're at. in the season or how the birds are reacting, and knowing and having a game plan, having multiple clubs in your bag, so to speak. If you can hunt multiple different times of the year, that helps you develop skills to where instead of being the guy that says, oh, they're henned up, so I'm not going to go out and hunt, or I'm not going to wait, or no, you just know how to react and know how to have a game plan and execute accordingly. So.
Mm-hmm. So do you spend any time in the evenings hunting turkeys, or do you typically hunt just mornings and then kind of scout the rest of the day? And the reason I ask that is because there's a handful of people that I know they'll hunt in the morning and that's it. And then they're like, well, because it's just a low percentage, opportunity in the evening. And I'm like, well, and I can sort of attest to that to a degree. But again, I also am a firm believer in you can't get them on the couch, right? So
yeah, So what I'll say is this: if I'm hunting, if it's fall or winter or early spring, the only part of the day I'm taking off is the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. Meaning that approximately 9 or 10 o'clock till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where I go in and take a nap or go scout other birds or whatever I do. Evening is one of my favorite times to hunt. So obviously mornings are great, evenings are great. I took a tally of the last few years of birds, percentages of different times of day approximately that shot birds. And in mornings and evenings, it was like that 4 o'clock or after, I think, was one of my higher percentages that I was shooting birds. And you could shoot birds in the middle of the day too, and it gets to a point during the season where the toms are cruising just like bucks during the rut to where they're just moving and you can call them, and it can be 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and obviously that varies by state because there's still a handful of states out there that you can only hunt till noon or 1 o'clock, whatever it is. Used to be that way in Minnesota back in the day. You could hunt till noon or 1. So what you do in Minnesota is you hunt till then, and then in the afternoon you go trout fishing and then scouting, and then hunt the next day. So
this is so crazy. This shows my ignorance to all of this and how new I am. I'm a complete rookie. This whole thing is like on the job training right now.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when you say that too, because so when I first moved here in the mid 2000s. Growing up in Northwest Minnesota, I didn't even know turkeys lived in Minnesota. Yeah. I didn't even know it was a thing. Yeah. Because we just never saw them. I don't think they were reintroduced up into that area until, I think it was maybe right about that time, or maybe it was early 2000s while I was going to college. But and then they thrive, now they're doing really well up there. So I see them all the time when I go back home, but it was just interesting. When I first moved here, I was like, what was the turkey hunting stuff? You know what I mean? And then Ben, Ben, we were always going out and trying to kill geese too in the fall, going up to Nathy's farm and trying to bow hunt geese.
I was just going to ask, is this with a bow?
Yeah. We walk the ditches, and then try to get in close and then just kind of poke up over there and get within, 30 yards and shoot geese. And I never had any success, but that was kind of that was kind of my beginning of really diving deep into bow hunting. So I was really green at that point still, but yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do that. I've never tried it, but I remember the double bowl videos back in the day. They did it a few times. I just thought it was really cool. I've never done it, but it's definitely on my list. I at least want to do it successfully a time or two in my life, right?
Yeah,
that's so insane. Well, did Damon do that last year?
Not that I know of, but maybe.
I know there's always people doing it. I have yet to do it. I probably could, but I just never think of doing that. Waterfall for me is with a gun.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to Tim Wells' stage where I'm hunting everything with a bow. That's insane. So other than the bow itself, you've got the release, the broadheads, arrows, but in my eyes, you've got calls and decoys and blinds. What do you think attributes the most to your success outside of just the bow itself?
I could look at that in numerous ways. Whether you're talking, if we're talking about what attributes it as far as like a skill set goes, I would say being a good shooter and having good calling skills. It does come into play. because it can your first plan of attack is you want to make the best plan possible, and that's by scouting. So from that aspect, if I'm talking about a product in itself, I would say binoculars are extremely valuable.
Really?
Because, and the reason for that is if you're watching things from, a quarter mile away or further, you want to really key in and zone in on where birds like to move and why they're moving a certain area, what elevation they're going at, what ridges they're walking, things of that nature. So if it's a product itself, that comes into play. If it's if we're talking things that make you successful, if it's a skill set we're referring to, I'd say being a good shot, because obviously you have a very small target. So another argument that could be made is have a big broadhead. I like shooting big broadheads. So ones that I shoot quite a bit are those Grim Reaper whitetail specials, the 3-blade 2-inch. That's key. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize about shooting turkey with a bow is they rarely ever stop moving, and it's a target that is small, hard to hit. And it's a target that it's a lot of times, if you're not familiar with the anatomy and where the feathers are and how the bird's positioning itself, it's hard to tell where it is, right? Because they might turn their body one way and that spot you want to hit it, if they're broadside on the wing, that's there, but that's not where the vitals are anymore. So understanding, where to go through, a good point of reference, I would say, is, if we're getting into shot placement, it's, always want to be in line above the legs, but just kind of getting back on, sorry to get off, I didn't mean to get off topic, anything like that, but just kind of referring to a product, I'd say having good binoculars is very key. And then, because it comes into play as far as just kind of watching what's going on, making sure that, if you're walking into a spot and you don't have that, you don't take the time to glass or look over things, those birds are going to see you before you see them, and you're going to bust birds out of there that you didn't know were there. So that can come into play as well. And then, obviously, focus on, being a good shot. And then, I'd say you always, one of the harder things to do at anything in life is attack your weaknesses, because we all want to tell ourselves, like, no, I'm good enough at this. I can get by with just this. But if you, in the off season, I'll usually, from the beginning, what I try to do is take, one thing I say, hey, what do I struggle with? What can I get better at? What can I improve that? And just be honest with myself. I think it make a difference. And, 1 year early on, I'd always make excuses for myself that I wasn't good at mouth calling, a long time ago, right? And I said, you know what, I'm going to take the off season and pursue this. I got better at it. So I think, definitely calling does come into play, especially during the spring season. So
I'm just smiling because I'm like, I got my first bird, but it started with a miss. And for that reason, it's just, you got the bow and you're like, practice your weakness. And how do we get moving targets like that all the time? I mean, that first bird I ever killed, that thing was jumping all up and over that decoy, and I'm like sitting there like trying to track it, and then finally let her fly, and it's just right over its back. I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. But yeah, being a good shot is definitely a huge thing. And then just, I mean, that's just tough to practice. Those birds just move so much, and you're right. It's such a small target to hit, especially the bow. You don't have much error.
And and there's times where you think you know where to hit, but you don't.
Yeah.
And you're trying to focus on, I've had that happen where, you had birds that, I think the closest shot I've ever made it was at 1 yard. Really? was 1 yard. But that was where I made a mistake of setting up by a fence line one time, and set up in the dark, and I was like, oh man, I screwed up, and the birds were just walking the edge of this fence line behind my blind, and I couldn't get in, come around the front or go under or over the fence, and I just opened a back window and drew back, and one walked by, blew on the mouth call. They stuck their head up, and it was 1 yard away.
How'd you tee that up? I mean, are you looking just front of arrow, head, and then?
Well, I just put my pin somewhere on him, and then he ran a 30-yard circle for about 15 seconds, before he ran out of oil pressure.
That's insane.
But getting back to what you had talked about, I mean, I hate to admit it. I mean, I put a lot of effort into being a good shot, but I've missed birds at 10 yards, several times. It happens, they move, and all of a sudden you think your arrow's going the perfect spot, and feathers come off it, and the bird runs away out of your life forever. So
yeah, it's incredible. It's been a learning experience in 3 seasons. It's insane.
I'd say that happens to me more often than not too, where you
Yeah.
take the shot and you're like, how did I do that again?
Yeah.
What am I doing? You know, and then, so to your point too, with their vitals and everything, when the bird that I shot last year, when it came in, there was some tall grass out kind of in front of the blind. And so I was like, oh, I don't, you know, I'm like, gosh, okay, I think this looks like, you know, based on his back, I'm like, this looks like a good spot, you know, that looks like the spot. And then all of a sudden, he kind of stopped and then picked his head up, and I was like, all right, boom, let it fly. And I shoot with both eyes open so I can track my arrow pretty good.
Yeah.
And immediately I was like, oh, too far back. And he did 2 leaps, flopped over and died. And it ended up being a heart shot.
Yeah.
You know, so again, and just like you said, right in line with the legs and everything, but it was just, I know where to shoot, but it just seems like when you get in the moment and for whatever reason, you just have this, you know, and maybe it's just from hunting deer for so long, but you just have this concept or this thought process that it's going to be up closer, you know, up here, and not realizing that this is all crop and this is all, you know, there's nothing all up here. It's much further back and lower, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're at the same time, I shoot with one eye closed, and at the same time, I catch myself, opening the other eye, closing the other eye, opening the other eye, closing the other eye, just to try to, especially when they're moving, where they're beating up your decoy, moving back and forth. You're like, okay, where am I on this bird? And you're trying to like line it up and make a shot before they move again. And it's more challenging than I'd like to admit. It's and humbling at many times, but I've screwed it up enough to where I've learned quite a bit. And when it'll happen to me again, I guarantee you. I don't beat myself up as much about it, because I realize, you know what, this is a hard thing you're doing, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Josh had said something pretty cool last week too about it. Just made me think when you said you're at full draw and you're trying to follow the bird and everything. And he was saying one thing that a lot of people get hung up on is like the bird's there and you got to like capitalize on it on that in that moment, because you might miss an opportunity. He might lose interest and take off. And Josh is like, just chill out, man. Just give. So I don't know if you would agree with that, or, he's like, but if he's on that bird and he's focused on that decoy, and he's like, as long as you don't do something to, allow the turkey to catch your movement or make a sound or something like that, he's probably going to be there for a little while. You got some time.
Generally speaking, yeah, especially if you're able to get to full draw. So, if you have I try to set my decoys up. If I have a general idea where I think the birds are going to come from. So if I think the birds are, roosted up on my left, are going to come from my left, I'll set my decoys out in front of the blind further to the right of my shooting window. So that gives them time to walk into frame, right? So I see them coming, I draw back, and they don't hang up, way further out away from my decoys to where I can't get a shot. Also make sure I have multiple windows open and give myself multiple opportunities. But I would agree with that. And it's hard to do in the moment, especially if you haven't done it a lot. I get anxious myself still to this day, and after the hundreds of times I've done it. But I think there is that once you get into a scenario so many times, you have a more calm demeanor, and Josh is a great hunter too, so he's able to have that experience and speak from that experience. But if you've only done it a few times or whatever, it's hard in the moment when your adrenaline's going to say, this is everything I was hoping for, and this is this is my make or break moment, and it's hard to make yourself do that in the moment. But I would say that's definitely words of wisdom, and if you can do that and kind of calm yourself down to make the best shot possible, and I'd say that usually rings true. So
you mentioned something a little bit earlier about tracking.
Yeah.
Let's touch on that a little bit. I want to talk about what you were saying in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on in my career, when mistakes I made, and I learned from a really, really good bow hunter that lives in Nebraska, and I kind of learned from him and hunted with him a few times, and he'd taken many turkeys with a bow, and I talked to him about it, and I had hunted with him one time, and we were sitting in the blind together, and I shot a bird and thought I made a pretty good shot, and the bird went out of sight. And I'm like, okay, I was used to, I had done more deer and bear hunting at the time and not as much turkey hunting. And he's like, okay, we're going to give him 3 hours. I'm like, what?
What? Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that I do that every single time now, but turkeys, if I just kind of have a general rule, is if I make a hit and they make it out of sight, I'm going to at least give them an hour. And then the number 2 thing I would say for sure is have an arrow knocked when you start to track. Be looking for them, have an arrow knocked. If you're not sure if that bird's done or not, don't be afraid to shoot again. Because, when I started out, I made the mistake of thinking I made a great shot. Oh, he ran off, and I'm sure he just tipped over like a deer does. It doesn't necessarily work that way. They don't go into shock like a deer does, so to speak. And they're either bedded and ready to run, or they're dead, one of the two. So it's usually if you have a bird make it out of sight, make yourself wait at least an hour, and then knock an arrow when you go tracking. And that's the piece of advice I would have, because I've had some bad experiences to where the track took longer than it should, or even lost bird a couple times and got burned that way. So I would say that's a piece of advice that I have and it's hard to do. It's another thing that's hard to do in the moment, because you're excited. You're like, oh yeah, this is a done deal. I can go grab my bird and go home and go to bed. You're tired and getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning. And so I would say definitely it's if you're somebody that's listening that hasn't done a whole lot of it before, it's not necessarily like shooting a deer all the time, to where you just because you think you made a good shot. Generally, if you do make a good shot on turkey, they aren't going to make it out of sight. So just keep that in mind, and keep yourself disciplined if you can.
They're incredibly resilient, is what I've found.
Yes.
I mean, they'll get smacked off a windshield and fly away, and then I've just heard all the stories of people shooting them and they go away. And I'm not afraid to admit the only 2 I've killed have been with 2 arrows. And last year, the one I shot, that one was a good shot, and I thought he was dead. But that long grass you're talking about, I go in there, I did have an arrow knocked, because I've learned my lesson through deer and whatnot. And all of a sudden he just stands up and starts bolting. I'm like, no way this is happening right now. Like, I thought this thing was done. And to your point, have that arrow ready, because I had it and pinned him right to the ground. He's done for sure then. But I just was like, what the heck? I mean, I swear to God that thing was completely done. But maybe that'll be the next thing I take to the blind, is even if it goes in the long grass and I can't see that he's for sure done, I'll just give him the extra time, because it's incredible.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, reminds me of a hunt, and this is going to sound like a crazy story, but it was years ago. I was hunting a property out of state, and I called a bird in and thought he was 20 yards. He was a little further than that. Broadside, thought I made a good shot. He ran off. Bedded down and started tracking him. He ran off, and I never found him. So I was obviously pretty upset about it, and thinking what I do wrong. And the answer was I shot too low, so I just shot breast is what I got. But a year later, almost to the day on that property, called in a group of 3 toms and made a perfect shot going away. Well, I got the bird, and I was cleaning the bird, and there was there's like a 2.5-inch healed up Rage Extreme hole in the breast.
What?
So
No
and,
way.
And I'm the only guy that bow hunts turkeys out in that area. I'm like, it's the same property, same setup. It was like my blind was like within 10 yards of where it was the previous year, and I'm like, no way. It's like
That's insane.
Absolutely, and so it was like a year to the day, and I was like, wow, what are the odds, right? So I was just kind of like, wow, that's kind of cool, actually. So
Yeah, I mean, you hear it with deer, but the birds, I'm just like, it's a tiny little thing. It should be dead easy, right? Apparently not.
Was that a particularly chewy part of the breast when you were eating it, or
well,
all scar tissue?
I think that one I definitely just put in the crock pot and and did some there are a few tricks. I mean, wild turkeys in general, wild game in general. There's a trick or a know-how, and cooking it. But I mean, I can cook wild turkeys like it'd be one of your favorite recipes. You just gotta have a little bit of know-how on it.
Yeah.
That's
and
going to be another episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm throwing my bid in right now because I was lied to the whole time I was growing up, and I think that might maybe be part of why I entered so late. I've always heard wild turkey's terrible. This is the best turkey I've ever had.
It's so
Yeah.
good.
The first one I got, shot and, retrieved and cooked. I won't eat a store-bought now.
It's so good.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah.
lied to the whole time. I
Mhm.
mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, and like I said, we can do this a different episode if we want to, but it comes down to kind of your know-how. It's understanding that wild animals aren't just like the animals you buy in the store that have been
Yeah.
raised and engineered specifically to taste good and be
Mm-hmm.
table fare. But if you know what you're doing and have a little bit of experience and take a little bit of advice, you'll be fine, and it can be some of the best eating you have.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, for sure. So one last question that I have. So we've had a rather odd season here as far as, weather, precipitation, lack thereof,
Yeah.
a lot of warm weather. Do you think that, because I have some people say, well, it's not going to affect anything with the turkeys because their breeding season is based on photoperiodism, just like deer.
Yeah.
And so the hens are going to go into their phase like they normally do. But I know weather also plays a factor in that, and heavy snow would too. What's your thoughts on how the turkeys are going to react this year?
My thoughts are, and this might not be the answer people are looking for. I just really try to keep an open mind, and I'm not going to act like I know everything, because I really don't, because I've had it happen certain years where I'm hunting a property early April and the birds are on fire, and you can call them in and they're coming to every call that you got, and you have the exact same weather conditions the following year, and it's a different story. They're bunched up, and I haven't. I wouldn't say that I've necessarily put a ton of time thinking about what's gonna happen, because what's gonna happen is gonna happen,
Right.
and I'm just gonna have to react accordingly.
Yep.
So I've heard what you had referred to as the amount of daylight kind of triggers it, like deer, and or some people say, the temperatures or ground temperatures or things of that nature affect that, and when the hens are nesting and things. And I haven't really, to be honest, I haven't put a whole lot of effort into thinking about it or that, because it's really something that's out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
To where if we get into thinking about things that we can't control, it's going to consume us, and we're going to worry about it. So
Yep.
I try to just go, you know what, I'm going to show up, I'm going to watch what's happening, and I'm going to react accordingly. You just try to have the skill set to make a game plan, and who knows, it might be like you show up, you start hunting early April or mid-April, and it's like you're hunting mid-May. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll kind of watch what's going on and react accordingly. So you might have biologists that tells you differently, like, oh, I know this is exactly what's going to happen, and you'll have a guy that hunts here or there and says, oh no, I watched this happen, or I saw them strutting late February because it was so sunny out. I think they're already breeding. And
Yeah, I've heard that a bunch of times
you'll
already.
hear that, and you're like, well, buddy, they strut and fight year round.
Yeah.
But and so there might be truth to some of that, but it's if it's out of your control, all you can do is kind of watch what's going on and execute accordingly.
Yeah. The ability to adapt, right, is what's
Yeah.
gonna, and that of course comes with the experience that you have and just getting out there. You know what I mean? So to your point, you just got to make a decision, do it, and try to figure it out as you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Work with what you've got.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to do now.
Yep.
He said it first.
Work with what you got, man.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I did put some thought into it just because I think normally, like in Minnesota, I think I usually do season. Well, so now I do apply for or I do buy a season tag because I go out with my buddy with a shotgun during a specific season, and then you've got the last 2 seasons that you can use a bow still. So so I started doing that now, and then this year I was just like trying to be strategic about it, and I thought, well, if it's true that because of the weather, things might start to kind of happen a little earlier on. I wanted to get in on an early season, but I didn't want to do season A because we do hunt public land. So I wanted to kind of try to avoid the crowd a little bit. So then I was like, well, let's do season B. And then it also happened to work a little bit better with my schedule too. So that's why I decided to do that ultimately. and I don't know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great that you can go with your friends and family. I mean, I'd say some of the most memorable times I have is just you got a friend you go out with, and you make that a priority. Do it intentionally to have memories together, and that's a great thing.
It's fun too, because then because with a bow, I'm most of the time going to opt to be in a blind, which is fun, but it's also kind of cool just to like run and gun for the day. We'll just get out there before the sun comes up and throw some calls out and and then just work your way over there and sit down by a tree and wait. Oh, if that didn't work, move over here. There's that's fun too, know, and I like to do that, but I'm looking forward to it. And this conversation really got me pumped up. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lone survivor. I just do my own thing. Public land warrior.
Yeah.
Little does Katie know that the reason why we bought that house is because it's actually real close to all the public land I hunt. So
Oh, it's a bold strategy there. I
yeah,
love
it is.
yeah.
It's gonna be a 5-minute drive for me, man. No more 35 minutes.
You got it figured out, man.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Awesome. All right. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode. Matt, thanks so much again for your time today. Really appreciate it. So where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Well, I'm not like, I don't have my own show or social
Matt
media.
Dykes Turkey Slayer Show.
I didn't create my own turkey hunting page or anything like that. I'm just a normal guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm on social media, Facebook and Instagram. But I have people reach out to me pretty often, ask me questions about hunting, this, that, the other. I'm always happy to help people. Even if you're just a beginner, that's what I'm here for. And so if you want to talk, I'm on Facebook or Instagram, and hopefully be posting some turkey pictures in the coming months.
Yeah, man.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, man, for sure. Hopefully all of us.
Yeah, hope so.
Yeah.
I'm going public again.
I gotta hunt with Johnny this year, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, that's right.
It's gonna be lots of beer cans falling out of that blind, man. I tell you what.
The lucky ones for turkey hunting, I'll tell you, are summer shandies.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right.
I have stories.
I just have swear words.
Johnny will be really upset with me if I show up with summer shandies,
Yes.
but I'm sure he'll have his Surly Furious too, so we'll be in good shape. Summer shandy, I'll remember that one. That's great.
Yep.
So you can find us at the Range Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook. Also, be sure to head over to the Vapor Trail and Stoker Rise social channels and give us a follow there. Once again, you can find the video version of this episode on our Vapor Trail YouTube channel, so be sure to get over there, subscribe, hit the like button, and hit that bell so you can be up to date on all things archery. And of course, if you're listening, be sure to head over and make sure that you give us 5 stars.
5 stars.
And with that,
There it is. We're packing up our bows, and we're beating the snowstorm and not going to the range. Peace out, y'all.
have a great day, everybody. Thanks. Vapor Trail is now offering an exclusive discount to the Range Podcast listeners. Enter promo code TRP15, that's TRP15, at checkout for 15% off VTX bowstrings and Vapor Trail and Stoker Rise branded t-shirts, hats, and other gear.